I never thought I'd write these words, but I need to tell you what happened on that March 23rd. Because sometimes, when you're at 37,000 feet and you hear the sound no pilot ever wants to hear, you realize your entire life comes down to a few crucial minutes. My name is Captain Robert Mitchell, but everyone calls me Bob. I'm 42 years old, and I've been flying commercial aircraft for almost 2 decades. I've flown through calm skies and raging storms, transported presidents and honeymooning families, faced turbulence that seemed like it wanted to rip the wings right off the plane. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what happened on TAM Flight 8847. It was a typical Tuesday when I arrived at São Paulo's Guarulhos International Airport at 5:30 a.m. The weather briefing indicated favorable conditions for the São Paulo-Miami flight, a route I knew like the back of my hand. Our Airbus A330-200, tail number PT-MVF, was in perfect condition according to the maintenance report. With 180 passengers on board and a crew of 12, everything seemed like a routine operation. My co-pilot was First Officer Michael Thompson, a competent 28-year-old I'd flown with a few times before. The lead flight attendant, Patricia Johnson, had over 15 years of experience and knew every emergency procedure by heart. The team was prepared, the aircraft was in order, and our approved flight plan would take us over the Atlantic on an optimized 8-hour, 40-minute route. During the pre-flight checklist, we meticulously reviewed every system. The Rolls-Royce Trent 700 engines purred smoothly during testing. The flight computers were configured, communications working perfectly, and weight and balance calculated with precision. Mike checked the hydraulic systems while I verified the navigation instruments. "Captain, all systems normal," Mike reported after completing his portion of the check. "Perfect. Guarulhos Tower, TAM 8847, requesting clearance for departure," I transmitted on the radio. "TAM 8847, cleared for departure, runway 09 left, wind calm, QNH 1013, the controller responded. At 7:15 a.m., we began taxiing to the runway threshold. The passengers were already seated, many sleeping, others checking their phones one last time before shutting them off. Families heading to Disney World, business people on work trips, retirees fulfilling their dream of seeing Miami Beach, each with their stories, their dreams, their reasons for being there. During the takeoff roll, I felt the familiar sensation of power as the engines reached maximum thrust. The A330 accelerated down the runway, and at 165 knots, I gently pulled back on the yoke. At 7:22 a.m., we were airborne, beginning our climb to cruise level at 37,000 feet. "Gear up," I commanded, and Mike retracted the landing gear. "Positive rate, gear up," he confirmed. The first 2 hours of flight passed without incident. We cruised over the Atlantic Ocean, with the rising sun painting the clouds below us in golden and pink hues. The autopilot maintained our altitude and route perfectly, while we monitored systems and maintained regular contact with oceanic air traffic control centers. At 9:30 a.m., we were exactly in the middle of the Atlantic, about 1,200 nautical miles from the Brazilian coast and approximately 900 miles from the nearest islands. It was at this moment that the ocean seemed infinite in all directions, and you really felt the immensity of the planet. "Mike, how about some coffee?" I asked, relaxed. "Good idea, Captain. I'll call Pat." It was exactly at 9:34 a.m. when our lives changed forever. The sound came first, a deafening metallic bang that reverberated throughout the entire cockpit, immediately followed by violent vibration that made the whole airplane shake. Alarms began blaring in a chaotic symphony of audio and visual alerts. Red lights flashed on the panel like fireworks, and the smell of burning invaded the cockpit. "Mayday, mayday, mayday," I shouted into the radio, my training taking control even as my heart raced. "Atlantic Oceanic Control, TAM 8847, we have catastrophic failure of the right engine." I quickly looked at the instruments. Engine number 2 on the right side was completely dead. Worse yet, the indicators showed extremely high temperatures, 0 oil pressure, and the fire suppression system had activated automatically. "Mike, engine fire checklist now!" I commanded. But when I looked out the right side window, what I saw made me swallow hard. It wasn't just an engine failure. Pieces of metal were streaming from the nacelle, and I could clearly see that part of the engine had simply disintegrated. Debris gleamed in the sunlight as it fell toward the ocean, and a trail of dark smoke stretched behind us. "Jesus Christ," Mike muttered, following my gaze. "TAM 8847, Atlantic Oceanic received. State your emergency and intentions," came the calm response from the controller. "Control, TAM 8847. We had an explosion of the right engine with fragmentation. Engine completely lost, possible structural damage. 180 souls on board, fuel for approximately 4 hours. We need emergency landing at the nearest airport." While speaking on the radio, my mind was rapidly processing our situation. We were in the middle of the Atlantic, with a destroyed engine and possible damage to the right wing. The A330 was designed to fly on one engine, but our position was extremely complicated. The nearest airports were Recife in Brazil, about 4 hours of flight time with one engine, or the Cape Verde Islands, slightly closer but still too far. "Captain, I've completed the engine emergency checklist," Mike reported. "Fire extinguished, fuel cut off, electrical systems reconfigured." "Very good. Now check if we have any structural damage. Look at all hydraulic, electrical and flight control systems." That's when Patricia appeared at the cockpit door, her face pale but professional. "Captain, the passengers are scared. Some saw the engine debris. How should I proceed?" "Pat, make an announcement explaining that we had a mechanical failure and that we're proceeding according to safety protocols. Keep everyone calm, but prepare the cabin for a possible emergency. And check if any passengers were injured during the initial vibration." "Understood, Captain." While Patricia returned to the passenger cabin, Mike completed his systems analysis. "Bob, we've got problems," he said, using my first name, something he only did in very serious situations. "The right hydraulic system is showing low pressure. I don't know if it's because of the engine fragments or if we lost hydraulic fluid. And look at this." He pointed to the flight computer. Our fuel endurance had decreased dramatically. With only one engine operating, our consumption had increased significantly, and the additional drag caused by the destroyed right engine was forcing us to burn even more fuel. "Atlantic Oceanic, TAM 8847, updating our situation. We have compromised hydraulic system and reduced fuel endurance to approximately 3 hours and 30 minutes. Request information on alternate airports." TAM 8847, understood. "We're checking options. Stand by." It was at this moment that I realized our situation was much more serious than I had initially thought. It wasn't just a matter of flying on one engine to the next airport. With reduced endurance, continental airports were beyond our reach. And with the hydraulic system compromised, a normal landing would be extremely challenging. Mike was working furiously on fuel and distance calculations, using the navigation computers to evaluate all possible options. "Bob, I've done the calculations 3 times. With our reduced speed and increased consumption, we can't reach either Recife or the Canaries. But there's one option." He pointed to the navigation map on the display. "Ascension. Ascension Island." My heart almost stopped. Ascension Island was a small volcanic island in the middle of the South Atlantic, British territory, with a military runway. It was approximately 400 nautical miles from our current position, theoretically within our reach, but with a dangerously small fuel margin. "Atlantic Oceanic, TAM 8847. Can we get information on Ascension Island runway? We calculate it may be our only viable option. TAM 8847, stand by. We'll contact Ascension authorities." While we waited for the response, I made an announcement to the passengers over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, This is Captain Robert Mitchell. As some of you may have noticed, we've had a mechanical failure in one of our engines. I want to assure everyone that our aircraft is completely safe, flying on one engine, and our crew is highly trained for these situations. We're heading to an airport where we'll make a precautionary landing. Please remain calm and follow the instructions of the cabin crew. We'll keep you informed about our situation. I turned off the intercom and looked at Mike. We both knew I had omitted several crucial details, but there was no need to cause unnecessary panic. TAM 8847, Atlantic Oceanic. We have information on ascension. Runway 0725, 3,050 meters long, 45 meters wide. Current weather conditions: wind 090 degrees at 15 knots, visibility 10 kilometers, clear skies. Local authorities are being notified of your emergency situation. Control, TAM 8847, thank you very much. We confirm Ascension Island as our alternate destination. Request direct vectoring. TAM 8847, cleared direct ascension, heading 195 degrees. Report when beginning descent. I programmed the new course into the flight computer, and the plane began a gentle left turn. But even as we did this, I could see on the instruments that our fuel margin was decreasing by the minute. Mike, how long to ascension? Under current conditions, approximately 1 hour and 45 minutes, and we'll arrive with about 800 kilograms of fuel remaining. 800 kilograms. In an A330, that represented approximately 15 minutes of flight time. No margin for missed approaches, no margin for holding, no margin for error. It was at this moment that Patricia returned to the cockpit with a worried expression. "Captain, we have some very nervous passengers. One lady had a panic attack, and there's a gentleman who says he's an aeronautical engineer and is questioning our ability to fly on one engine over the ocean." Pat, first, the lady in panic. Give her one of the portable oxygen masks to help control her breathing, and if necessary, administer an anxiolytic according to medical protocol. As for the engineer, ask him to come here and talk to me. 2 minutes later, a man of about 50, appearing nervous but trying to maintain composure, entered the cockpit. "Captain, I'm Chuck Rodriguez, aerospace engineer with Boeing. Sorry to bother you, but I need to know our real situation. I saw the engine debris, and from the vibration I felt, it seems like there was catastrophic turbine failure." I appreciated his honesty and technical knowledge. Sometimes having a specialist on board can be useful. "Chuck, you're correct. We had fragmentation of the right engine, probably high-pressure turbine failure. We're flying to Ascension Island, where we'll make an emergency landing. The A330 is certified for extended flight on one engine, so we're within safety parameters." I didn't mention our critical fuel situation. "I understand, Captain. Can I help with anything? I know the A330 systems well." "Thanks, Chuck. For now, what I need most is for you to help keep the other passengers calm. If anyone has technical questions, you can explain that the situation is under control." He nodded and returned to the cabin. 40 minutes after the engine explosion, we were established on the route to Ascension, but our situation was deteriorating. Mike identified a small hydraulic fluid leak that, while not critical, was affecting flight control response. "Bob, the right aileron has reduced response. We're going to have to compensate during landing." "Understood. Let's practice some gentle maneuvers to see how the airplane responds." I made small inputs on the controls, testing the aircraft's response. The A330 was still controllable, but was definitely heavy on the right wing, requiring constant pressure on the yoke to maintain level flight. It was then that Atlantic Oceanic called us with information that would completely change our strategy. TAM 8847, additional information on Ascension. Due to military exercises in progress, the runway has equipment positioned that reduces available length to 2,400 meters. Confirm if you can still accept? My blood ran cold. 2,400 meters. An A330, under normal conditions, needs approximately 1,800 meters to land, but with one engine inoperative, hydraulic systems compromised, and weighing more than 200 tons due to the fuel we were still carrying, we would need at least 2,800 meters for a safe landing. Control TAM 8847, request confirmation, only 2,400 meters available. TAM 8847 confirmed. Military authorities inform that's the maximum available at the moment. I looked at Mike. We both knew what this meant. A landing in 2,400 meters would be extremely risky, with a high probability of running off the runway and possibly exploding in a ball of fire. Mike, do we have other options? He checked the calculations again. St. Helena is 700 miles away, too far. There's an oil platform 200 miles away, but obviously that won't work. Bob, I think our only real option is still Ascension, even with the reduced runway. I closed my eyes for a moment, doing mental calculations. If we continued to Ascension, we would have to execute an extremely precise landing with zero margin for error. Anything out of the ordinary, excessive crosswind, unstable approach, long touchdown, would be fatal. Atlantic Oceanic, TAM 8847, confirm there are no other viable alternatives in our area. TAM 8847 negative. Ascension is the only option with runway capable of receiving aircraft of your size in your range area. It was at this moment that I made one of the most difficult decisions of my career. Mike, we're going to Ascension. But first, we need to reduce our weight drastically. Fuel dumping? Exactly. And we're going to have to jettison everything possible. I initiated the fuel dumping procedure, opening valves that would allow us to expel excess jet fuel through nozzles at the wingtips. It was a drastic measure that would further reduce our endurance. But our landing weight would be critical to being able to stop on the reduced runway. Pat, I called over the intercom, prepare the cabin for emergency landing. Full procedure, brace position, removal of loose objects, evacuation briefing. And I want all passengers to know that upon touchdown, rapid evacuation may be necessary. Understood, Captain. Beginning emergency preparation now. While fuel was being dumped, creating a visible trail behind the aircraft, I began calculating our approach strategy. We would have to execute a steep approach, touch down exactly at the beginning of the runway, and use all available braking resources. Mike, let's review single-engine landing procedures. We spent the next 15 minutes reviewing every aspect of the emergency landing. Approach speed, flap configuration, use of reversers, automatic brakes, and evacuation procedures. At 120 miles from Ascension, I began our descent. Atlantic Oceanic, TAM 8847, beginning descent to Ascension. Request direct contact with local tower. TAM 8847, contact Ascension Tower on frequency 118.1. Good luck. Ascension Tower, TAM 8847, Mayday in progress, 50 miles north, descending to 10,000 feet. 180 souls on board, emergency due to engine failure with landing on reduced runway. TAM 8847, Ascension Tower, received Mayday, runway 07 active, wind 080 at 12 knots, QNH 1015. Emergency services are positioned, report when ready for approach. At 30 miles from the island, I could finally see it on the horizon. A small rocky speck in the middle of the infinite blue ocean. It seemed impossible that all our salvation depended on that small island lost in the Atlantic. Mike, approach checklist, flaps 15, speed 180 knots, fuel remaining 600 kilograms. 600 kilograms. Less than 10 minutes of flight. There was no margin for a second attempt. At 15 miles, I configured the airplane for final approach. Flaps extended, landing gear down, landing systems checked. The A330 was visibly heavy on the right wing due to engine damage, requiring constant compensation on the controls. Ascension Tower, TAM 8847, established on final for runway 07. TAM 8847, cleared to land runway 07. Wind 070 at 15 knots. The island was growing rapidly ahead of us. I could see the runway clearly, a strip of asphalt cutting through the dark volcanic rock. It was shorter than any runway I had ever used with an A330, but it was our only chance. At 5 miles, at 1,000 feet altitude, I made the final announcement to passengers. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the captain. We're beginning our final approach to Ascension Island. It's essential that everyone assume the emergency position that was demonstrated by the cabin crew. Remain in this position until the aircraft stops completely. Thank you for everyone's cooperation. At 2 miles at 500 feet, I could see the fire trucks positioned beside the runway, emergency lights flashing. All possible support was mobilized, but in the end, everything would depend on my ability to put 200 tons of airplane exactly where it needed to be. Mike, standard call-outs. I'm visual with the runway. 1,000 feet, speed checks good. 500 feet, sink rate normal. 200 feet, runway in sight. The runway was approaching rapidly. I could see every marking, every light. I had to touch down exactly at the 1,000-foot markers to have any chance of stopping before the end. 100 feet, speed good. 50 feet, 30 feet, 20 feet, 10 feet. I cut power on the remaining engine and gently pulled back on the yoke. The A330 floated for a few endless meters before the main wheels touched the asphalt with an impact that reverberated through the entire structure. "Touchdown!" Mike shouted. I immediately engaged reverse thrust on the left engine, pressing the brakes with all my strength. The airplane was decelerating, but speed was still too high. I could see the end of the runway approaching dangerously. "Maximum brakes!" I shouted. The A330 shuddered under the force of braking. The wheels were smoking, the brakes groaning under extreme effort. Speed was decreasing, but not enough. 1,500 meters of runway used, 1,800 meters, 2,000 meters. "We're going to run off the runway," Mike shouted. But somehow, impossibly, the airplane finally stopped just 50 meters from the end of the runway. For a moment, we sat in total silence, just listening to the hiss of superheated brakes and our own hearts beating frantically. "Control, TAM 8847. Safely on the ground at Ascension," I transmitted with a choked voice. Immediately, fire trucks approached, spraying foam on the smoking wheels. Passengers began to applaud, first timidly, then with full force, in an ovation that lasted several minutes. Patricia appeared at the cockpit door with tears in her eyes. "Captain, everyone is fine. No injuries. The passengers want to thank you personally." I unbuckled my seatbelt with trembling hands. Mike looked at me and smiled. "Bob, in 15 years of flying, I never thought I'd experience something like this." "Neither did I, Mike. Neither did I." I left the cockpit and was greeted by 180 people who looked at me as if I were a hero. But the truth is, I was just a pilot who did his job. A job for which I trained thousands of hours, but never imagined I would need to use all those skills in 15 minutes that determined the life or death of almost 200 people. Chuck, the aerospace engineer, was one of the first to congratulate me. "Captain, that was one of the most precise landings I've ever seen. How did you manage to stop on the runway?" "Chuck, honestly, I can't explain it. It was a combination of training, luck, and maybe a little divine help. During the evacuation, which was done as a precaution even without immediate necessity, I spoke with several passengers. An elderly lady told me she would never complain about turbulence again. A businessman confessed he had called his wife during the emergency to tell her he loved her. A family with small children simply hugged me in silence. The subsequent investigation revealed that the explosion was caused by an extremely rare failure in the high-pressure turbine disc, a part that had been inspected just 100 flight hours before and was within all safety parameters. The metal simply fragmented due to microscopic fatigue that no test had detected. The engine fragments partially damaged the hydraulic system and caused small holes in the fuel tank, explaining our increased consumption. If we hadn't dumped fuel, we never would have been able to stop on Ascension's reduced runway. We stayed 3 days on the island waiting for a rescue aircraft. 3 days during which I had time to reflect on what had happened. About how life can change in seconds. About how training can be the difference between tragedy and survival. About how sometimes everything comes down to 15 crucial minutes where every decision can mean everything. Many asked me if I thought about giving up flying after this experience. The answer is no. If anything, it made me realize why I became a pilot. To transport people safely, to be responsible for their lives, to be prepared for the impossible. Today, when I'm in the cockpit of any flight, I look at the passengers boarding and remember those 180 faces on Ascension Island. I remember the responsibility I carry, the training that can never stop, the vigilance that can never diminish. Because at the end of the day, being a pilot isn't just about flying, it's about being prepared for the day when 15 minutes can determine if 180 families will hug their loved ones again. And sometimes, when I'm cruising over the Atlantic Ocean on a starry night, I look down and wonder how many stories like ours are happening at this exact moment, thousands of feet in the air, with pilots who may never have to use everything they learned, but who are ready if they need to. Because that's the essence of aviation. Being prepared for the impossible, training for situations you hope you'll never face, and knowing that when other people's lives are in your hands, you'll do everything, absolutely everything, to bring them safely home. We never know when our most important 15 minutes will come. But when they do, I hope I'll be as prepared as I was that day over the Atlantic, when an engine exploded and forever changed my perception of what it means to be responsible for human lives. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more real accounts from the skies, subscribe to the Black Box channel and hit the notification bell. Share this video with someone you think should know these aviation stories. And leave in the comments, have you ever been through a situation where you had to make quick decisions under extreme pressure? How did you react? See you in the next episode, where I'll tell the story of a pilot who had to land a plane completely without instruments, navigating only by the stars. Until then, always fly safely.